Module 3, Data Collection and Analysis. Let's take a closer look at the ABC data collection form. To support you in identifying correct functions through the ABC data you collect, we've developed a recommended data sheet for you to use with your FBA. This data sheet has all the components needed to help see the entire picture and lead to an accurate function of the behavior. This data sheet is located in the e-guide. You probably are very familiar with how to collect ABC data, but we're going to briefly touch on some important considerations for filling out this particular form. For each new FBA, you'll type your specific target behavior and their operational definition directly onto the data sheet. For each episode of target behavior, you'll complete the entire row. All of the information is used to determine a baseline of occurrence as well as function of the behavior. It's also important to note that staff record only one antecedent and one consequence for each episode of target behavior. Doing so will help make it more likely that you identify the controlling environmental variables as well as the correct function. An episode may be a single incident of one targeted behavior, an example being student hits adult. It might be a multiple repeated incident of the same behavior, for example, student hits adult 5 times in a row. Or it could be multiple behaviors that occur together or as part of a behavior chain. An example being student hits adult, tips over a table, and then runs out of the room. Typically, episodes are separated from a pause in target behaviors where compliance is then reestablished, even if just for a short period of time. A new row will be completed for each separate episode. As you know, best practice for ABC data collection is 10 school days. However, there may be times that that period is shorter or longer to account for very high or low frequency behaviors. Take into consideration that you must train your staff on how to take this data. You have to explain the definition of the behavior in detail, explain each section of that data sheet, and practice one day and review the data to see if it's been done correctly by all staff. Here's an example of a completed ABC data collection form. As you know, taking ABC data consistently and accurately is critical to identifying the correct behavioral functions. To further support you through this step of the FBA process, we've included some resources to support you and your teams in collecting your ABC data. In your completion guide packet, found on the e-guide, there are handouts labeled Steps 4 and Steps 5, which contain reminders for best practices in ABC data collection. There is also a document which defines the terms and checkboxes in the recommended ABC data sheet. We hope these resources will assist you in collecting ABC data in an efficient and effective manner. How long do we take data for the FBA? As a general rule, the more frequent the behavior, the less time needed for data collection. For infrequent behaviors, more time is needed to get enough of a sample to see a pattern. The basics are, you want long enough to determine a pattern. Best practice is 2 weeks or 10 school days, with a minimum of 3 days if it's a very high frequency behavior. An important note is that for SIB, self-interest behavior, you may require less time for data collection depending upon intensity. Since it's self-interest behavior, we don't want to spend too much time gathering baseline data. We want to put an intervention in place quickly. Key points to remember. In understanding the ABCs of behavior, the starting point is always the behavior, the B. Then what happens before the behavior, the A, or antecedent, and after the behavior, the C, the consequence. Behaviors need to be explained in a specific, observable, and measurable way so that anyone who does not know that student could point out the behavior. And third, all behavior serves a function, either to get or avoid something, attention, activities, or tangible items. Summary and analysis. Now that you've taken all the data and have all this information, let's learn how to break it down into something we can analyze. The purpose is to find out what the hypothesized function is so we can better determine what interventions may help us teach a more appropriate replacement behavior. When we're conducting an FBA, we want to determine the why, the function of the behavior. This is either to obtain something or to avoid something. Common examples that may be present in the classroom are to obtain a tangible item, such as computer time, or maybe avoid a task, let's say writing. They may be trying to gain adult attention or avoid a demand. Of course, these are unique to the individual, which is why we always have to have data to determine the best hypothesis of function. The steps to summarizing all of your data to determine the function are: number 1, summarize using the templates provided in the e-guide. Number 2, graph the behaviors for that visual representation. And 3, fill out the template for summary of evaluation data and add it to the IEP. This is a shell that will assist you with making sure all of the pertinent information is included. So how do you organize all the information in order to analyze it? Here's a copy of the summary grid. The first thing you'll want to do is organize your ABC data sheets by dates. Add the total number of days in the data collection period. Do not count partial days or days that no inappropriate behavior occurred. Use the data to fill in the summary of evaluation. Some tips are: remember to fill in the behavior 1, behavior 2, and behavior 3 in the same order on each grid. This will keep it organized. Always include the dates the student was absent, as to document that the data collection was not lost or forgotten. You will have a total of 5 different grids, the first of which is frequency of the challenging behavior. Using tally marks, tally each time a behavior occurred on each date. When finished, total the tally marks for each of the occurrences for each behavior. Grid number 2 is the frequency of the behaviors by antecedent. In the antecedent column, list the antecedents from the ABC data collection sheet. Again, using tally marks, tally each time the behavior occurred for that specific antecedent. Total the marks, and for each behavior, circle the highest number. If the numbers are close, circle the highest and the second highest number. Grid number 3 will be your frequency of behaviors by consequence. Similar to that of antecedent, you will just look at the behaviors per consequence. At the end, total the marks and circle the highest and second highest if the numbers are close. Grid number 4 is the frequency of behavior by setting activity. So for the setting, you'll use tally marks each time a behavior occurred in that setting. Again, you'll total the marks and circle the highest and second highest if the numbers are close. Grid number 5 is the duration of behavior. In the duration column, list the durations from the ABC data sheet. Again, using tally marks, tally each time the behavior occurred for that amount of time. For each behavior, circle the highest number and second highest if they're close. The hypothesis pulls all the information together and guides the development of interventions and the replacement behavior. We've provided a template to guide in writing these. Using the information from analyzing your data, fill in the template. Here's an example. When Charles has not had breakfast or has problems on the bus, during work tasks when asked to read aloud, Charles disrupts the class by swearing at his teacher until he's asked to leave the group in order to escape reading. This way of phrasing a function leads us to a hypothesized function based on ABC data we collected. Note: each behavior will have its own hypothesized function. Once you have the data organized and have found your hypothesized function or functions, you'll need to graph the data. This gives a nice visual representation of the information and is added to the summary of evaluation data. I've included the graphing template link for Google Sheets, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just go in and input the data. It's also available under the Google Classroom FBA Resources tab. Once you've filled in the grids with the information from the ABC data collection, you can use it to fill out this form, the summary of evaluation data. This information will be pasted into the IEP under the FBA portion. You will also see a space to insert the graphs we mentioned in the previous slide. The functional behavioral assessment does not automatically result in the need for a behavioral intervention plan or BIP. When analyzing your data, ask yourself some guiding questions to help assess if the BIP is needed. For example, what is the intensity and frequency of the behavior? Maybe this is a behavior that doesn't happen very frequently according to your data collection. Perhaps it's not something that results in significant disruption. For example, the student breaks his own pencil. Low intensity and low frequency behaviors might not need a plan if there are things we can include in the accommodations. And number 2, can the interventions needed be listed as accommodations and allow the student to be successful? Again, some behaviors can be addressed through the use of antecedent or consequent strategies, and there may not be a need for a formal behavioral intervention plan. If you have any questions or think that a BIP may not be needed after you've taken the data collection, contact a BIS staff member to discuss it. We'll also have office hours available through the Google Classroom for any questions you might have.